want you to ponder the phrase self-existent for a moment. When you hear the word self-existent, what do you define or know that to be? Self-existent has nothing prior to it. There is no alpha, there is no omega, there just is the isness of that. And so if I were to ask you what would then you attribute to something being self-existent, what would you say? And there's really only one answer. Now we call it God. Some philosophers and teachers, such as Thomas Troward, called it originating intelligence. But the sun, our galaxies, are not self-existent. They were created. There was something primordial. There was something that was there long before any other form was in place. And so when we look at something as self-existence, and we humans, we have to label things, right? So we want to label it God. But it's beyond labeling. It's beyond gender. It's beyond description. All that we can actually begin to wrap our heads around and our understanding around is that it is the perpetuating essence of life itself. Always has been, always will be. Now here's the simple but remarkable news. You are a part of the self-existent cause. Your beingness. You and I are products of or instruments of that chain, what we call a chain of causation. Causation simply means the initiating of thought. In the beginning, there was God. In the beginning, there was originating intelligence. That intelligence then, believe it or not, had a desire to know more of itself. Just as you and I have innate desires, that desire comes from the chain of that self-existent causation. And so even that which was originating intelligence wanted to know more of itself. So there was this commandment or a demandment in this thing that we call law: let there be light, and then there was light. Let there be this then beginnings of a life form, and there were beginnings of life form. But the real thing I want you to wrap your head around is this phrase, self-existence, and what that means personally for you. Because for something to be termed self-existent, we even have it in our patriotic documents in America. We have a derivative of that, which all men, all women are created equal. It is self-evident that all of us that we describe ourselves as humanity are created equal. It's self-evident. What does self-evident mean? It's obvious. Always has been, always will be. So if we're equal, if we're a part of this thing that is self-existent, then what is the great news about that? The great news then is that all of the attributes that we contribute to or think of this intelligence, or we think of God as having, are attributes within us. There has never been a time then, from the time we took our first breath till the time we take our last breath, that which is self-existent has not been in place. That relationship with God has not been in place. In Latin, the word is aseity, which simply means to refer to the property by which a being exists. And so in the beginning was this self-existent cause. Cause and effect. The self-existent cause then desired, and effect began to become manifest. So when we think about that, our teachers told us, Thomas Troward wrote, whatever name that we give it, it is always the one, just as the choir sang. Self-existent, self-transforming power of which everything is a manifestation, simply because there is no other source from which anything could come from. So I was explaining this more in detail with my practitioner class on Tuesdays, and I said, how many of you are old enough to remember going to the movie theater and seeing the projection, the screen, but when you turned around there was this beam up in the ceiling? It was long before digital. And you guys are not willing to admit that. Everybody in first service was like, yeah, I was there. So, but if you can recall that, we're looking at a picture, we're looking at a narrative and characters, but what it is a fragment. It's a fragment or a projection of the illumination from that beam. And I said, what you and I are always trying to do our main objective in this life is to not try to fix the projection, but to get back to the beam. Because the beam is the self-existent cause. The beam is the original illumination, which is only pure love. Now, the thing that you and I carry with us is an enormous gift, and that gift is called free will. Free will is like the director who actually then produces film, and then the film goes in front of the beam, and then that's what makes the narrative, or that's what makes the story. And so you and I are directors, and we are directing, we are comprising, we are catering, we are clothing, we are writing all of the scripts about what's going on in our life. And that product of film, that narrative, those thought forms is what is going in front of that beam and is what is being projected. It's not being projected from the beam itself, because the beam is what? It's just pure light. What is in front of the beam is our thought form. And so our thought form is just being broadcast. Now here's the insanity of what you and I do. We forget that there's a beam. We forget that there is a self-existent cause. Always been there, always will be. And we are trying to do what? We are trying to fix the fragmentation or the film or the projection. We're trying to fix the world of exterior rather than realizing and remembering that we're the director and, oh my God, I'm the one who created this film. And so what do I have the power to do? Go back and to create a new film. And that beam very faithfully will continue to give to me whatever it is that I feed it, whatever it is that I put through the machine. And that's the way in which law works. And so that simply reminds us over and over again, whether we want to hear it or not, that we are responsible then for the movie that is playing. Not some other director. Not some other cast. Can't blame it on another caterer for bad food. We did all of it. We designed it all. And that's what we get to look at day in and day out. That's what self-existent means. And because we know that the light then will always be there, you get that, right? The illumination, source, it will always be there in its brilliance and in its absolute love. Then it simply waits in expectation for you and I to decide what kind of narrative we're going to create. And that narrative is based upon our loyalty to our thought system, to our core beliefs and values. And they are core beliefs and values that have not been crammed down into us. They are the ones that we have either accepted or cultivated through observation. And if you don't like the narrative, guess what? You get to create another one. That's the brilliance of life. It's as simple as that in a nutshell. Now, here's the thing. Most of us have a really hard time accepting anything as absolute. Anything is absolute. We want our wiggle room. We want exception. We love our yeah buts. We love our yeah buts because we want to be able to argue. And you know that funny saying that you and I get to argue for our limitations. And so by arguing for our limitations, we just continue to get limitations. And so if you can consider that there is something that actually is absolute, then that which is absolute is that beam of light, which is source, which is God, which is intelligence, whatever name that you are comfortable with. No name is wrong. Just as the choir sang that song so beautifully. I love the fact that that song was written by India Ari, and that her percussionist on the recording is our percussionist, Imran Kotan. I just love that. And so because we struggle with the absolute, we're constantly playing, you know, that humorous radio station, WIIFM, What's in It for Me? What's in it for me? That's what gets in the way of absolute. Because you see, I'll show up and I'll want to know what's in it for me. And if I can't perceive what's in it for me, then I'll want to look for exception. And I'll want to blame somebody for not getting my just rewards. That's the narrative that I continue to play. And so that's what the world continues to show to me. I'm directing that. I'm directing that. No one else is. And so we cannot have any permanent change in our life unless there is a permanent change in, here's the word, consciousness. Consciousness is the movie. Consciousness is the collective pool of thought. There will be no lasting change if you and I do not get our act together and begin to take responsibility for what we put before that beam of light. As within, so without. Whatever it is that we sow in thought, we reap. There is no wiggle room to that. So there is absolutism, whether we want to accept that or not. And so we then look for the way in which to work with that. And if we can remember that that which is the beam is absolute love without judgment, then we could actually begin to say, it doesn't matter what kind of movie I've been showing up until this point in time. It really doesn't. I can actually change the film right now. And at any given moment, there is no scorecard keeping, there is no history, there is no documentation, there is no book where your name's being written in, then it's being erased, and then it's being written in, then it's being erased, then it's being written in, then it's being erased. That which is love only knows and sees you as love. Can you imagine that kind of love affair in your life? That regardless of how we have been, that love is absolute. And so there are laws of what we could call laws of existence that we, in this self-existent causation as human beings, get to look at. And so whatever it is that we believe to be about ourselves, whether it is good or it is bad, that will be the thing that we will continue to perpetuate. So at the very core, if your inner movie, your inner director is constantly in negation about your worth, then that movie will always be about you and I missing the mark. It will never be enough. Even when they call, it will never be enough. That could be Steven Spielberg right now saying, I want to make this glorious picture about you, and we will not answer. Whatever it is that you believe, whatever it is that you believe about yourself. Now, this isn't what you give voice to in front of other people. This is what you actually believe about yourself in the privacy of your own mind. This is the consistent rejection that you partake in. That's the narrative, that's the movie that's being played, because that's the vibration that we give out. Vibration, you can't lie about vibration. You can lie about words, but you can't lie about feeling and vibration. And so we get to decide whatever it is that we believe. Lao Tzu said the unwanting soul sees what's hidden. The unwanting soul, by his description, simply means that soul which is at peace and understands the illumination and the self-existent cause of God. The unwanting soul sees what's hidden, and the ever-wanting soul sees only what it wants. It's only seeing that when the ever-wanting soul, the one that doesn't have enough, that's always wanting something more to fulfill it, will only see the not enoughness and the perpetuating of something being unfulfilled. So our fears then, whatever it is that we fear that will be done unto us, guess what? Will be done unto us. Not because we're bad, not because the world at its core is bad, it's because that's the way in which the law is being designed within us. And so there was this story of a milkmaiden, and she would deliver milk and carry it to her customers. And one of her customers was a Brahmin, a holy man. And to reach him, she had to take a ferry raft to cross this river. And the Brahmin worshipped daily offerings, and he would use the fresh milk in his ritual. But one day, the milkmaid was very late, and the Brahmin grew angry. "What can I do now with this milk?" he scolded her. "You are so late, it is no use to me." "Well, I started out early," replied the milkmaid, "but I had to wait a long time for the ferryman to bring me across the water." And the Brahmin chided her. "What? People have walked across oceans by repeating the name of God, and you can't cross this little river to get me my milk on time?" So the milkmaid was ashamed. The milkmaid was ashamed, and taking his words to heart, from that day forward, she brought the milk to him each day on time. One day he finally asked her why she was able to bring that milk without ever being a moment late. "Just as you said," she replied. "I crossed the river by repeating the name of God without waiting for the ferry. And with God's name in my heart and put on my lips, I crossed the water, and I put one foot in front of the other, and I do not sink." And the Brahmin shook his head in disbelief. "Can you show me that you actually crossed the water on foot?" Because he had actually not mastered that himself, you see. And so walking with the Brahmin to the water's edge, the milkmaid stepped into the river and began to walk across the surface of the water. Looking back, she saw the Brahmin lift the hem of his garment as he began to mutter the name of God and enter into the water. And with just one step, he sank. And she called back to him as she continued her walk across the water, "Sir, it is no wonder that you are sinking. How is God to carry you over the water when in the very act of speaking his name, you lift up your garment for fear of getting it wet?" Ooh, she showed him. So, there's nothing actually wrong with the tutelage of calling out the name of God, in that metaphor, or calling out the name of self-existent cause. And yet, many people do that, and they only do it through reproach or reprimand, but they're not actually practicing the principle themselves. And so what it teaches us is that it doesn't matter if we're a holy person, or if we are a lay person, or we're a beginner. It doesn't matter what our status is. What matters is the level of intent within our heart with regards to our communication and our relationship and our understanding and our devotion to that beam of light. Someone who's never been exposed to any kind of metaphysical teaching could hear that for the first time and rise above everybody else who's very seasoned in this. But so you see, there is no one singular teacher and then students. We're all teachers and students simultaneously. So last Sunday, we were in San Diego. It was Louise Hay's 90th birthday, and we went to celebrate her birthday with her. And during the day, Hay House put on a conference of Hay House authors. And the very last speaker was a very famous financier, a woman who has a tremendous rags to riches story. And I've heard the rags to riches story before. And yet what she then ventures off into is a lot of sort of reproachment, kind of like the Brahmin. She says things like, "You see these earrings? I've had these earrings for 17 years. I don't need another pair of earrings. You don't need another pair of earrings. If the backings fall off, then you get some backings, but you don't need them. I want to teach you the difference between need and want." And you're like, and then if you're 20 years old in here, you should be putting $100 a week away so that by the time you retire, you have X number of millions in the bank. And I'm looking around, there's not one 20-year-old in this space at all. And then if you're 30, and if you've waited till you're 30, this is how much it reduces. And I'm going, oh Lord. And then she goes, and 40, and I'm like, I'm just sinking, because I'm feeling like I'm never going to win. Right? Now, it doesn't mean that her message of financial responsibility is a bad message. But the way in which it's received then can actually assist you and I in creating a movie that gets put in front of the beam that substantiates the idea that you're not getting it right, that you keep screwing up, that no matter how your best efforts are that it's 3 steps forward and 5 steps back. And so you see, it doesn't matter what's presented in front of us. We will interpret it in such a way that it substantiates and upholds the narrative that we keep putting in front of that being. Until such time that we go, okay, well, good for her. You know, that worked for her. What works for me? See? And so that night at the actual birthday party, she was near us, and she had this beautiful silk pantsuit on, and Ty leaned over to me and he said, I bet she didn't need that pantsuit. She wanted that pantsuit. So what do we get to take from that, right? Not about judging somebody's presentation, but it's about having enough of a sense of self that you can glean and take what is working for you to help build you and I up, in order that the film that we continue to create then is one that is in harmony with the self-existent cause. Whatever one fears others will do to them, so will they do. Whatever one hopes others will do for them, they must begin to do for others, creating a consciousness pattern which will return to bless them to the extent that they bless others. That's the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you is a very similar philosophy that exists in all religions and within all faiths. If you have a desire or a passion in your heart, go and facilitate and help another to experience that same passion. Because what it teaches us is there is no such thing as limitation. There is no such thing as competition. What is out there is for you and I to understand that there's not only more than enough to go around, but that you get to honor the sacred spark, the inner propulsion of that passion inside of you without second guessing it. Without saying, well, they've already done that. Nobody needs what it is that I do. If it's in your heart, it's needed. If it's in your heart, there is an audience for it. That's the film then in your mind and your mental thoughts that you begin to produce and direct and create, because that then the self-existent cause could go, finally, I get to collaborate with you on something expansive, rather than continuing to give you what you think you can't do. Whatever man hopes others will do for him, he gets to do for others. Whatever woman sees what it is that she desires, she gets to help others do that for them. The golden rule. I like this one. Whatever disease one dreads, so will they become prey to it. For they are creating the consciousness pattern of the very thing that they're saying that they don't want. Why? Because that's what the mind is on. That's the film that is being directed. Whatever is sent from one's mind and heart returns to them in due course. And so these are the fruits of what we call free will. The fruits of free will. There's no other way that you and I can escape what we think, because then that's wanting that wiggle room. Our thoughts do create our reality. I say I'm sorry very briefly because I want you to pivot over to the joy of that. And I want you to go, woo-hoo! Oh, that was so lame. Okay, so, for you are born of creative consciousness. You are born from this self-existent cause. Once upon a time, there was a blind girl who hated herself just because she was blind. And she hated everyone except for her loving boyfriend. He was always there for her. She said that if she could only see the world, she would marry him. And one day, someone donated a pair of eyes to her, and then she could see everything, including her boyfriend. And her boyfriend asked her, now that you can see the world, will you marry me? And the girl was shocked because when she saw that her boyfriend was blind too, and having hated her former blindness, she refused to marry him. And her boyfriend walked away devastated. And months later, she received a letter. And he had written her and he said, "Just take care of my eyes, dear." I didn't expect that kind of reaction from this story. So, you ready? We're kind of like the girl. Because we're in relationship with self-existent cause that loves us unconditionally. And in that realm of absolute, it continues to show us the possibility of what our life is designed to be, if we're interested. And when it shows us what we're thinking, when it shows us continuously what we're feeding, what we're putting in front of the illumination, what we're putting in front of the beam, it's just showing what we're giving it, what we're bringing to the table. Then we start a discourse or a trajectory of making other people wrong because we don't want to take responsibility for our own thoughts. We want there to be wiggle room. We want there to be a caveat. We want to be able. We become a species that wants to pinpoint it and blame it onto something else. And our freedom lies in accepting the fact that we've been given eyes, and we've been given a heart, and we've been given a mind, and we've been given limbs and the ability to communicate, and we've been given day after day opportunity in order to use the limitless, expansive nature of self-existent cause. And I want to ask you, how are you doing with that? Because you and I have at our disposal infinite supply. If I know that the thought is not working for me, if I know that my anxiety and my worry about what if is only going to continue to bring me more anxiety and what if, then why would I then continue to perpetuate and walk down that road? And here's the thing. These are mindsets coupled with emotional patterns. And regardless of the mindset and the emotional pattern, what is the one constant about that self-existent cause, that being? What's the one constant? Love. Just loves us. Just loves us. You and I can never go to our grave saying that we haven't been loved. No, here's the thing. I don't even know if we can fathom that kind of love. A love that only sees the perfection, that sees itself, that sees the beam of its totality in you and I. That's all that it sees. It doesn't see the garbage of the movie. It only sees the beam of the light behind that. That's all that registers. If you know that you are that loved, hear me. If you know that you are that loved, if you could consider that, what would you drop right now? What story would you drop right now? What collection of who did what to whom to when would you be able to drop right now? And in order to embrace and to allow, that's a great word, allow that illumination to begin to co-create, collaborate, and design for you what it is that you say that you want. Well, that love is real. That love is the only constant. And that love is what you are, period. And so it is. Hi, I'm David Ault, and I simply want to say thanks. Thanks for taking the time to watch our broadcast here at Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta. We have a vision, And that vision is to reawaken all to their spiritual magnificence. And one of the ways that we are able to do that is through this very medium of broadcasting. So if you got anything out of this, if you felt in any way inspired, or if something spoke to you directly, then I extend an invitation to you to become a part of our family by donating. And there are many ways in order for you to be able to do that. One is to simply go to our website at slca.com, and there you will find all different kinds of prompts that will help you support what it is that we are doing here in Atlanta. One way is to become a pledger. That means that you decide on a monthly basis that you are going to help us with this vision. Another way is to donate through our management system called Fellowship One, another through PayPal, and another even easier way is on your cell phone. You can do what's called text to tithe, and that number is 404-796-7030. Again, thank you so much for your support, and I invite you to come back weekly to see what it is that we're up to. Blessings.